Okay, continuing with our 8-part mini session, pre-summer health session, sponsored by Chazak. My name is Dr. Shmuel Shields. I'm the nutritionist today doing this series. And if you have any questions or comments or any feedback, anything you need to know more about, please address your questions to events@chazak.org. And Chazak is spelled Chazaq. Okay, events@chazak.org. Okay, we are going to start with the topic today. The mini session, health session, is on good carbs, bad carbs, carbohydrates. Last session was on fats and oils and the confusion there. I would say that carbohydrates are probably equally confusing to many people because over the years, many dietary plans have advocated either no carbs or low carbs or all sorts of different information on carbohydrates. And also there's been even more confusion with the issue of gluten. Many people have been led to believe falsely that they can only maintain a good level of health if they get all the gluten out of their diet. Which is certainly not true, certainly not backed by any scientific evidence. And I could tell you, unless you're suffering, unfortunately, from celiac, or you have what we call a gluten sensitivity, and there are people that are sensitive to gluten, these people should probably be careful. Obviously, with celiac disease, you have to avoid gluten completely. Some people who have gluten sensitivities may be able to tolerate a certain amount of gluten before it starts to bother them. But certainly, if you have a bona fide problem with gluten, so for sure you should either stay away from it or minimize your intake. But the other kind of carbohydrates, which are basically the 5 biblical grains. A Rebbe I had many years ago at Yeshiva Kesed Torah taught us a way to remember the 5 biblical grains. Rabbi Yair Hoffman was the Rebbe, and he said he made up an acronym, BROWS, BROWS. So we have barley, rye, oats, wheat, and spelt. Those are the 5 biblical grains that have sustained civilizations in good health for thousands of years. Okay? So no reason to give up on those biblical grains. However, there is good reason to give up or certainly reduce your intake of the refined and processed grains that are out there today. But to use the unrefined, complex carbohydrates, they should be part of a well-balanced meal plan. Again, we don't have to sit down to only carbs at a meal, but some of the healthy carbs should find their way into our daily eating. They provide good nutrition, they provide fiber, they have the B vitamins, they have vitamin E, they have many essential elements that a healthy meal plan is going to need. So what are some of those better carbohydrates? We mentioned some of them. There's a whole list of better carbohydrates that can be and should be used. They include things like, first of all, let me just explain, I touched on it in one of the earlier sessions, that when we refine a grain, when we take a grain and remove essential elements that the Rebbeinu Shalom put into the grain, again, nothing that Hashem makes is non-essential. If it's in the grain, it serves some sort of a purpose there, some sort of a benefit to us when we consume a grain in its whole state. So first of all, when we consume whole grains, we do not get a spike in blood sugar because that grain has to be digested and metabolized, and it breaks down slowly in the body, and it contains a good amount of fiber. So the release of glucose that's in that grain, and by the way, grains are our main source of energy. Just as gasoline fuels the automobile that has a gasoline engine, so grains, which eventually break down in the body into glucose, glucose is our body's fuel. Okay, it's a fuel that the body uses for energy. So when we fuel ourselves with some of these whole grains, we get a very gradual release of glucose into the blood, and we get a sustained level of energy for a longer period of time. And we also benefit from the dietary fiber that are in these whole grains, as I mentioned. They help to stabilize blood sugar and help with cholesterol and things like that. And we also feel full. We feel fuller when we eat these whole grains, because any foods that contain fiber and that are in that whole form, there's usually a mechanism in there, which is really the fiber and the nutrients that fill us and satisfy us. When we eat a lot of the processed grains, I know when I have eaten white rice in the past, I need to eat a lot more of it to feel full than when I would eat brown rice or wild rice. So we have a beneficial effect there. We don't have to eat as much of the whole grain, so we could reduce our caloric intake, and the body's getting the nutrients that we need. So we're not craving for food down the road shortly after eating because our nutrient needs weren't met by using the processed grains. Okay, so that gives you a little feel for the importance of the whole grains in our meal plans. And again, the processed grains will give us, like with white bread, white rice, white pasta, certainly things like cakes and cookies and pastries and donuts and all these processed flours with added sugars and bad fats are only going to work against us in terms of weight, in terms of blood sugar problems, cholesterol problems. These kind of starches can affect cholesterol, they can affect triglyceride levels. So there's a lot of health implications when we're using these processed grains. You will get a spike in blood sugar, and your body is going to lose nutrients because you're not getting the nutrients from these grains, and in the process of digesting these grains, they will take nutrients out of the body. So it's what we call like a negative nutrient food. So again, my suggestion here would be to stick with the whole foods, use some of the whole grains in the diet. Other starches, which are not technically grains but are complex carbohydrates, which are excellent to use, would be things like squash, sweet potatoes, even beans and legumes, which we're going to talk about in another upcoming class. But these things, lentils, peas, these things are in the starch family too. They're unprocessed, and these are excellent food items to incorporate as well. Okay, I appreciate your tuning in to this this 8-part mini session, and we are going to continue next time with we are going to do protein, best protein choices. Thank you for joining us.